I was already nervous when I walked into my parents' backyard that day. Every time I made myself go, I told myself the same thing: be calm, keep distance, don't react. I was 25 and a grown woman. I was a single mom. My little girl, Haley, was 8. All I wanted was to keep her safe from the things I had lived through. My parents always said I was being dramatic. They called my pain childhood nonsense. But it didn't feel like nonsense to me. It felt like years of being made small. They picked on me. They punished me. They made fun of me. My sister Rachel was always the favorite. She was treated like she could do no wrong. That afternoon we were at a backyard barbecue because my mom had guilted me into going. She said people were talking about me and that I was embarrassing the family. Haley came straight from dance practice. She was still wearing her pink hoodie and jeans. She was smiling and excited because she thought there would be burgers and cousins to play with. Rachel walked out in a fancy outfit and looked at Haley like she was a mistake. Still doesn't dress like someone important, Rachel said, smiling like she was better. Haley looked down. I felt my jaw get tight. I told myself quietly, not today. No fighting. Stay calm. Rachel stepped closer and whispered mean things about Haley. My mother laughed like it was the funniest thing. My dad joined in with his own cruel words. They called me names and blamed the life I had for being the way it was. Haley reached for my hand. I squeezed her fingers back. I wanted to take her away. I told Haley to sit by the edge of the pool and watch the water while I fixed her a plate. I turned my back for 5 seconds. 5 seconds. When I looked back, Rachel was behind Haley. She pushed Haley into the deep end of the pool. Haley was fully dressed. Her hoodie and jeans and socks pulled water into her clothes. My scream came out, but it didn't sound like a real voice. I ran. I did not think. Haley's hair fanned out in the water like black ink. She was small and she was shocked. She was not coming up fast. I tried to jump in, but my dad grabbed me from behind and held me. He said, "Stop. She needs to learn." He told me if Haley could not survive the water, she didn't deserve life. I clawed at him. My body shook with fear. I yelled Haley's name like the sound might make her come up faster. Rachel stood there and laughed. My mother held her drink and did not move. My dad had his hand on my neck. My vision went gray at the edges because I was so scared and so angry. I kicked backward hard. My dad lost his balance for a second. I tore out of his grip and threw myself into the pool. Haley's eyes were wide and looking for me. I wrapped my arm around her and pushed us up. I got her out of the water and held her close. She was coughing and choking and trying to breathe. When I looked at my parents and my sister, they acted like nothing had happened. Rachel smirked. My dad straightened his shirt. My mother rolled her eyes and called me a drama queen. I held my wet, shaking daughter and something inside me broke. This was not a family anymore. It was danger. I made a choice in that moment. I would not let them hurt us again. I would not plead or cry to make them stop. I would take steps so they could not get to us. I would use laws, people, and rules to keep my child safe. I would not give them the power to do this again. I called 911. My hands were shaking and Haley had foam at the corner of her mouth. The operator told me to keep her warm and lay her on her side. The ambulance came. The paramedics were calm and kind. They wrapped Haley in a blanket, checked her breathing, and told me to go with them to the hospital. In the ambulance I held Haley on my lap. Her eyelids fluttered like a small bird trying to steady itself. At the hospital, nurses and doctors were quick. They watched her oxygen and listened to her chest. They asked me who was with her, who pushed her, and if anyone stopped me when I tried to help. I told them the truth plainly, the truth I had practiced saying in my head for years. They wrote down my words. They took pictures of the bruises. A social worker sat with me and said very gently that she would make the call to protect my child. Police officers took statements. Cousins who had been quiet at the barbecue finally told the officers they had seen Rachel shove Haley and had heard my mother laughing. When an officer gave me a card, he said they had filed a report and referred the case to Child Protective Services. He said someone would contact me in 24 hours. The words felt cold, but they also felt like a first step. Someone else would be watching now. A caseworker named Maria came that very evening. She had steady eyes and a calm voice. She explained things simply: safety plans, supervised visits only, temporary orders to keep us safe, and telling the school so Haley would never be released to anyone who could harm her. She explained how the system would work to keep us safe. I signed forms and gave them the screenshots I had saved for years. I handed over the messages and recordings that showed how they treated me. Maria put them into evidence. She called the school and told the principal what had happened. By lunchtime the next day, Haley had a confidential safety code in her school file. Teachers and staff were told not to release her to anyone without written permission. The school said they would assign someone trusted to pick her up if needed. That felt like a shield. It was simple and quiet, and it kept her safe. I also talked to the pastor of the small church where my parents were well known. I told him the facts and asked him to keep children safe at church events. He talked to the people who managed volunteers. My dad was quietly removed from youth roles. No big show, just the doors he used to walk through closed. I reached out to 2 people close to my parents and asked them for a small favor: no unsupervised visits and no events with children while this was being looked at. One cousin texted back and said, "I didn't know. That should not have happened. I'll keep my children away from their house." It was small, but it mattered. Little by little, people who could protect us began to help. My lawyer, a friend's recommendation, wrote an emergency protection letter and sent it to the police and to Child Protective Services. I did not want revenge that made noise on the internet. I wanted safety and rules that could be enforced. I wanted supervised visits if any visits happened at all. I wanted a paper trail so that their actions could be proven and kept from hiding. We did not file for full custody that night. We built a foundation slowly with evidence, doctor's notes, witness statements, and the hospital record. Behind the scenes, I changed my phone numbers, got a new mailing address for school papers, and put new locks on my apartment door. These small changes cost little money but gave us safety. I arranged for Elena, a trusted friend, to be the emergency contact for Haley at classes and activities. I signed Haley up for a local swim class where the teachers were trained in water safety and in protecting children. I made sure the class times were ones my parents could not suddenly attend. I taught Haley to float and to shout calmly for help. I wanted her to feel strong, not scared. While the adults who hurt us started to lose their places of power, Haley began to heal. At night I rocked her and told her stories about brave dinosaurs who learned to swim. I did not tell her what happened to make her afraid. I told the stories so she would know she was brave. She started to sleep longer. She ate more in the morning and picked up her crayons again. Small things, but they meant the world. A week later I went back to my parents' house to collect Haley's things. I did not go alone. I brought Maria from Child Protective Services and a police officer. My parents could not act like everything was normal when I was not alone. My dad looked confused. He seemed to think the world would just go back to how it was. Mom began to rant, but the officer stopped her and said we were there to get the child's items. Rachel tried to walk toward Haley's room like she still owned everything, but Maria raised one finger and told her she could not be part of the process. Rachel stayed frozen for once. I went upstairs and packed Haley's favorite dolls, her sketchbook, pajamas, hair ties, and backpack. When I came downstairs, my parents stood like children who had nothing to protect them now. For the first time, I looked my dad in the face without fear. "You will never have access to my child again," I said. Not supervised, not at holidays, not at school. Not ever. He laughed at first, a small laugh, but it died. At that moment, the officer handed him papers for an emergency no-contact order. He was not allowed within 300 feet of Haley. My mother and Rachel were not allowed near her either. He had no warning. The order was already active. It was real. That was the point. I did not yell or make a show. I used the law and the people who keep children safe. I took away the one power they always had over me, access. I walked out holding Haley's hand. Maria was on one side and the officer on the other. My parents watched us go. They looked like they could not breathe, but it was not guilt that showed on their faces. It was the moment they saw that they could not touch or control us anymore. After we left, I kept working quietly. I did not post anything to make them look bad on social media. I did not make a spectacle. I used systems that matter: the police, the school, the church leaders, medical records, and the law. I made sure everything was in writing. I kept a clear path so anyone who tried to scare us would be traceable. Friends and people in the community stepped in where they could. Some volunteers stopped including my dad in their work. The church did not make a public scene. They simply changed the roles he used to hold. He could no longer walk into those places like nothing had happened. Slowly, the things that had given them power faded. Not because I shouted or made drama, but because I took steady, small steps that added up. I built a fortress of paperwork and people who understood and would act. That fortress kept my daughter safe. That was my plan and my aim. Haley learned to be brave in small ways. She learned to trust grown-ups again who had clear rules and who listened. She learned that she could float and that crying for help was okay. She colored and drew and laughed again. She found parts of herself that had been hidden. Sometimes revenge can look small and careful. It can be quiet and smart. It can be the loss of the things that let people hurt others. When privileges disappear, the places you once walked proudly, the roles people gave you, what is left is an ordinary person who can no longer hide cruelty behind a smile. I did not want to hurt them. I wanted to keep my child safe. I wanted my daughter to grow in a home where she could sleep without fear. I wanted her to have teachers who would never let her leave with someone who might hurt her. I wanted laws and people to stand between us and the danger that had lived just next door for too long. Now, years later, I still remember that day when Rachel shoved Haley into the pool. I still remember the way I felt crawling out of the backyard with my daughter wrapped in a towel. I remember the smell of chlorine and the siren and the quiet that came after the first storm. But I also remember the small things that came after: the forms signed, the new locks, the swim lessons, the teacher who winked and said, "We've got her," the friend who kept his kids away. I will never forget the look on their faces when the front door closed. They did not lose a fight that day. They lost access. They lost the power to reach in and make us small. And that was enough. This is not a story of public revenge. It is a story of protection. It is a story of using the quiet tools that keep children safe. If you ever feel small or afraid, remember this: you can use small, steady steps to build a shield. You can call people who have rules and power to help. You can keep the people who hurt away from the ones you love. Haley is older now. She still likes to draw dinosaurs that swim. She still likes pink hoodies and messy braids. She sleeps through the night. She laughs at breakfast. She is safe. And because she is safe, I am free from the most terrible fear I ever had. I will always protect her. If you watched this and it helped you feel brave, please tell us where you are watching from in the comments. And remember, safety is quiet, steady work. You do not have to shout to win. Please like and subscribe for more videos. Also comment where you're watching from.